Hello and welcome to the Situation Report today. This is the show where we do our very best every single episode to give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. My name is Jeremy Stolniker. I am your host. And today we are actually going to replay an episode that we recorded several months ago now, and I'm going to tell you why we are replaying this episode. If you follow this show at all, you're familiar with Chad Robichaux, and you are familiar with, I would imagine, if you've been following along on this show, with the work of Chad and so many folks in Afghanistan, during the fall of Afghanistan, the craziness that happened there. You may be familiar with Aziz as well. Aziz was Chad's interpreter when Chad was deployed to Afghanistan several years ago. And there was a movement to get Aziz and his family out of Afghanistan. That became something much larger, many thousands of folks being evacuated out at that time. Several months ago, we did an interview with Chad and Aziz, hearing Aziz's story and hearing the story of the evacuation and how a lot of that went down. Fantastic interview, well-received interview, really great conversation. This last week, the book, Saving Aziz, that Chad wrote about that time was finally released. It was a long release, finally released this last week, and it has been received very, very well. And we wanted to replay this episode as we also encourage you to go and get the book, Saving Aziz. This episode is fantastic. The book goes into much greater detail, of course. You can find that book just about everywhere that books are sold, of course, but the very best place for you to go is to the website, savingaziz.org, savingaziz.org. You can find that book, and I know that you will appreciate this conversation. Again, we recorded this a couple of months ago, but with the book coming out and so many folks being excited about just hearing the story again and being motivated and encouraged and challenged, we wanted to play it for you again. So go get the book, savingaziz.org. And with that, I hope that you enjoy this episode of the Situation Report with Aziz and Chad Robichaux. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Situation Report. This is the show where we do our very best 3 times a week to give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. We talk about culture all the time and the things that are happening here in the United States, the stuff that we're trying to navigate. Today, our conversation is going to be a little bit different and looking forward to having that. My name is Jeremy Stolniker here with Chad Robichaux, and it's good for us to be in the same place for the first time in a while.
Yes.
To be able to record. We've done, of course, several shows together, but here being in the same place is awesome.
Yep.
And special guest with us today, and looking forward to this conversation. A little bit different than normal, but super excited about it. I had the opportunity to meet someone I feel like I've known for a long time. Aziz is with us. If you haven't heard his name, we're going to talk about Aziz and a lot of what happened in Afghanistan back in August of last year and what's happened since then. But when I met Chad, I started to hear about Aziz and the partnership that you guys had in Afghanistan and the work that you did together. So I feel like we've known each other for a long time, but we just met today actually in person, which is awesome. But as those of you who have watched this show and listened to this show know, and if you haven't even gotten it from this show, you've gotten it. A lot of things have happened around the world. We like to talk about what's happening culturally here in the United States. But what happens in other places around the world impacts what happens here in the United States. And again, we talk about this a lot. We live in a global society, whether we like to acknowledge that or not. We fight about it and push back, but we do. What happens in other corners of the world impacts what happens here in the United States. And one of the big issues that we have had to deal with and we saw happen and we've been involved in is what happened in Afghanistan. Not for the last 20 years, although we've been involved there, but really what happened as our current administration made some decisions in response to the decision to pull out of Afghanistan and how all of that would play out. We've talked about that. But in the process of that, an organization was stood up, which we've talked about. I'm going to have Chad talk about that a little bit more today as well. But all of that being said, and that's a lot of stuff, all of that being said, we'll get there. We know that many, many, many folks, thousands of folks fleeing Afghanistan have had to relocate around the world. And the big question I think we should be asking ourselves is, and then what? what happened? Where are they? How are they transitioning? How are they getting back on their feet? How are they getting their families involved in the various countries around the world where they have found themselves? We want to talk about that a little bit today, so appreciate the opportunity, Aziz, to talk about this. And to Chad, I know you have a lot to say on what happened.
Yeah.
And kind of the front end of that. So catch us up to date on that. And then I'd love to hear, I've heard the story, but for those that are listening, your story with Aziz, how you guys have gotten to know each other and develop that relationship.
Yeah, well, one, you said something important, that what happens around the world impacts us in America. But also, I think what happens in America impacts the rest of the world.
Yeah,
and that's that side of it is what ultimately led to Afghanistan and the withdrawal of Afghanistan. And the people, we talk about the withdrawal of Afghanistan, but the people, the real people with names and families and faces, and humans that were affected by that decision. And thousands and thousands of lives were lost and are being lost today. The major oppression, I mean, you who needs to leave Afghanistan still? Who's still stuck there? I would say 40 million people that are not the Taliban. I mean, we have maybe 100,000 Taliban. It's going to grow every day now. But 40 million people are stuck there. 20 million women and little girls are immediately sexually enslaved to the Taliban and their ideology of just oppression and control. And so it's a terrible situation. The way I got involved in it was early on in Afghanistan. I was a Force Recon Marine, went to a JSOC task force and deployed to Afghanistan 8 times in that capacity in JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command Task Force. And during my 8 deployments, I had a very unique experience that many service members don't have, is I had the same interpreter for all 8 deployments because I didn't do different deployments. It was really just one mission the whole time. I would just go back and forth. And that interpreter was Aziz. But Aziz, quickly became more than an interpreter. He became our friend, and then he became our teammate. Very vetted, working at the premier, top Tier 1 level Special Operations unit for over a decade, and just being vetted to the point to where he could operate with us. And many times it was just Aziz and I going out to Taliban villages or in Pakistan or different parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan to set up operations to put our assaulters on target to capture and kill bad guys. And that's what we would do. And we'd set up these operations and then make sure they got safely out of there and build all the infrastructure and equipment in place to be able to do those things. And that's what we did. And when you do something like that together, you develop a really big bond. So I didn't go back to base after I was there. I'd go to Aziz lived in my home, or I would go to his home, and his son, who's here now, and holding him when he was a baby. He's 18 years old now, holding him when he was a baby and eating dinner with their families.
He was at jiu-jitsu with you guys?
Just at jiu-jitsu this week.
This week of your kids.
Yeah, they came to jiu-jitsu, and it's funny because they've been watching us for years at jiu-jitsu. It's like, can't believe we're really here doing jiu-jitsu. Right. So it's been a crazy few weeks with the family, but the relationship that we had through that, it's one that you can't just walk away from.
Yeah, of course.
And so when Aziz was done with his operations, we wanted to get him to America because this is what our government promised them. All of our interpreters were promised, a pathway to U.S. citizenship in a 9-month process, by the way. It was supposed to be 9 months. In 2009, the SIV, Special Immigrant Visa process, was told to be 9 months, and they were contractually promised a pathway to citizenship. I mean, they've read it. We know who they are. They're loyal to us.
What year was that program put in place?
2009.
2009.
Yeah,
it's a 9-month process in 2009. We're in 2022, right?
Right. And so for almost 6 years, Aziz was in this process. And so as we saw President Biden announced the withdrawal, I knew that process would not, it's not going to speed up now. It's only going to get worse now because people are going to panic. We had to go get him. And so people would ask, why are veterans doing that? It's a cowboy thing. Well, who else is going to do it? The United States military is not allowed to. Who has the experience to do it? The veteran community, particularly in our case, special operations community, people who had not old experience, but still some current experience working for government agencies in precision rescue operations. So we put together a really good team of people that I knew had the skill sets and people I could trust. About a dozen of us, 12 of us specifically, so 12 people. And we put a plan together, and we got a lot of support. We have obviously a lot of relationships, so we had permissions from the Joint Chiefs office to be able to go in Kabul and the HK Airport, Hamid Karzai International Airport. We have a good friend of ours, Glenn Beck, who had raised a bunch of money to help with the evacuations and ended up allocating over $20 million to us for our flights. And then we went to the UAE, United Arab Emirates country, and we needed a place to bring these people to, because if you don't have visas and you start bringing people out of a country, that's not called evacuations, it's called human trafficking. So we didn't want to be
different category.
we didn't want to be human trafficking people. So we had we had a relationship with the royal family from one of our team members, Joe Robert, who's a Mighty Oaks alumni, and talked to them, briefed them, and they agreed to help us and gave us access to the humanitarian center. And gave us permission to use 2 of their C-17 planes with pilots, which is huge planes, military planes, to be able to evacuate people. And so what started off as a mission to go get Aziz quickly grew into something else. I remember one of our teammates saying, hey, there's these 3,500 orphans, let's get them. And we're saying, hey, if we get all these resources, things are coming together in a period of about 5 days, by the way, which I believe is not my capability. I'm not smart enough to do that or capable enough to do that. It's a God-ordained thing. God orchestrated these series of events. We started building infrastructure for organizationally. Mighty Oaks initially stood up, worked with the Independence Fund and Sarah Verardo to build this Save Our Allies campaign, which we spun off to be its own independent nonprofit. And so as that launched off to go help all these people now, not just Aziz, we got to Abu Dhabi, set up operations center in UAE at the Abu Dhabi, where the military is there. Put teams in place at Kaya Airport and start sending 3-man teams outside the wire to get vetted, very important to say, vetted individuals using a bona fides process to validate that's who we're getting, and get them back into the airport, manifest it, approved manifest by our government, and not just random people who stuffed on a plane, and flown to the humanitarian center in Abu Dhabi. I think it's important to say, because we had got a lot of heat being like, a bunch of veterans going out there just grabbing people, put them on planes. And first of all, like, if you just stop and pause in that moment, that thought for a second, that's not even possible. Right? Like, you can't just go, think about, you're just going to go get a plane, fly in that country and start putting people on and fly them to another country. There's immigration processes, right? There's customs.
The airport was controlled by the United States government. So I think people miss that too. They think you set up an airfield somewhere and got people on buses. And it was actually, there was a control point controlled by, I think, an Army command at the time. Yeah,
if you think you could do that without any kind of permissions, you're just, it's not even worth having a conversation, because that's an ignorant thought. So we had a lot of permissions, a lot of checks and balances, but we were given those permissions, we were trusted, and we did a good thing. We were given our own ramp and our own manifesting, and we got, but we were dealing with a lot more stringent criteria than the United States military, who are able to just put people on a plane and take them.
Filling seats.
Yeah. We couldn't do that. And so everybody we went to the humanitarian center. That first day, that first group was Aziz, his family, and about 180 other people. And then the next day was 800 or so. The next day was 1,000. And then honestly, after that, it became a blur, because we just were hustling so fast. Every hour we'd stop and sleep were people, lives at stake. So we just went. We didn't know how much time we had. And in about 10 days, we got 12,000 people. And then when the United States military left after the Abbey Gate was blown up, they pretty much ceased letting people in. We knew as a group we couldn't leave, because we knew there were still Americans there, interpreters, their families, vulnerable people, women and children. And for us, it's like you kind of know too much to walk away. And the news is saying one thing, but reality is another thing. I think the news is saying 100 people, the White House is saying 100 people, Americans left there, and we're saying there's probably thousands. And but the truth is, none of that matters. If there were one, we would have been willing to stay there, because we don't leave Americans behind. And our interpreters and their families who had served by us for 20 years, we owed them the ability to be able to evacuate them. And so we chose to stay, and we stayed. Started flying people out of a place called Mazar Sharif, flew another 5,000 people out, and then myself and another Marine went into a border area of Tajikistan, Afghanistan, on the border, and spent 10 days on about 90 miles of border, building routes out for people to pass that information so people could cross the Panjshir River and get across that river to self-evacuate, and just knowing safely where they could cross, where was the Taliban, where were the Chinese, where were the Russians, where were the parts of the river that they would get to and not be able to cross. So provide that information to them. So we continued on and ultimately, again, got 17,000 people out physically. And then who knows how many people got out through our support we did. But it all began with Aziz.
Yeah.
And he went to the humanitarian center, and him and his wife and 6 kids, spent 8 months there. I got to see them there. Our reuniting was there, and I remember seeing him the first time and just hugging him, and his kids coming up and calling me Uncle Chad, which makes me cry. And then we continued, but for 8 months they've been, and then many are still there. Thousands are still there because our State Department has not moved them on. And Aziz is one of the lucky ones. We know a lot of people. We're able to pull the right strings. And it took 8 months to get him here. And now for 3 weeks now, he's been in America. For those who follow Mighty Oaks, he's our newest employee. He's our cultural advisor in our international division, which you'll hear more about here soon. But it's been great to have him here, and it's been great. It's been great to have him here. It's very surreal for me.
Sure.
But it's also been great to see how Americans have responded. We're in Texas, and they welcoming him as an American, as a Texan, thanking him people are thanking him for his service to America, and in the outpouring of support. My garage right now is full, literally full of Amazon registry stuff for their home that we're trying to move them into. They're in an Airbnb right now. We're going to move them in a home here in a week or two. And luckily there'll be less things they have to buy because so many generous people are helping support them. But that's not the case for everyone.
It's not the case for everyone. Have you ever picked up a towel set because it felt really soft in the store, but then when you got to use it, it's not very absorbent? It's basically a towel that's leaving you out to dry. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels. Towels that work. I know, it's mind-blowing. A towel that actually dries you. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors, and right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $49.99 when you use promo code SITREP. Go to MyPillow.com right now and click on the radio listener special. MyPillow products come with a 10-year warranty, have their 60-day money-back guarantee, and are incredible. To receive this amazing offer on the 6-piece set of MyPillow towels, just go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and enter promo code SITREP, or call 1-800-870-0283. That's MyPillow.com, promo code SITREP. So those thousands of folks ended up somewhere around the world. I want to talk about that, but before we talk about that, I would love, Aziz, for you to just give us some perspective on your involvement with the United States military and what happened in Afghanistan. Because, I mean, this is something I don't think anyone really talks about, is how does a guy who has a family in Afghanistan connect with the United States military and start to translate? How did you get involved in that? And then, I'm not asking for the top secret way that you got involved in or how you recruited, but what caused you to go, this is something I want to get behind? How did you get involved in all
from
this?
a kid, right?
Yes, well, it's not enough to just say thank you. It's above and beyond what you did for me and for all the Afghans, the interpreters and the colleagues that work for the United States government or on behalf of them. I'm totally speechless about that. Honestly, what really motivated me to get involved with all this in Afghanistan and work with the United States Army and for the government was because whatever they were doing was really benefiting Afghanistan in long term and short term. That really motivated me because we have been a really backward country, and our neighbors were not really good neighbors, and we have been always in problems from the neighbors. So I took it as an opportunity to work for democracy, freedom of speech, which I trust and believe, and that really encouraged me, and I was eager to work for that. While doing that, I engaged lots of risks, lots of dangers for me and my family. Especially in 2007, we have a Black Friday. Then my parents told me that I have to get separated from them because if I continue doing the same thing, I was putting their lives in danger. So I continued doing the same business, but I had to get separated from my parents and brothers. I totally moved to another different district. I continued up to mid 2015. And then all of a sudden, you know, they shut down everything and they left, and they're like, thank you very much for the service. Here's the bonus. See you later.
Yeah.
These are the documents. Apply for the SIV. And SIV, as Chad mentioned, it's a slow process through the USCIS. I applied in mid 2015, yet I'm waiting to receive my COM approval. If it was not about him and his teammate, I would be dead by now.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of the interpreters, a lot of the folks who worked with the military, so I was in Iraq and I didn't go to Afghanistan, but we had these incredible interpreters that were attached to us in Iraq, and these guys came from farms and very small communities. And they are, as you mentioned, they're putting their families at risk, they're putting their own lives at risk. Is that the same? And again, this is really important because people don't get a hold of this, right? Like, who are all these people? Is that the same for everyone?
I'd say where it came from for you, like when you started speaking English, like as a kid, like about like having to leave the country once before.
Right.
Like, how did it start for you? Like when you started learning English, and why did you start learning English?
Actually, my parents really motivated me when I was really young to learn English.
Yeah.
Because there was a say that the pipeline will come from Turkmenistan to Afghanistan. It will connect Pakistan, India, and the region, and they will need people who can speak English.
Yeah.
So that was the main concept behind that, and I was really supported and motivated through my parents. And then I got this interest in this, and I kind of learned English by self-learning. I bought me some books, and I was learning my daily vocabulary slowly. Then
How old?
I was around my 14 or 15 years old, and then
People who are born here that don't speak English that
then
well,
I noticed that not only by learning I will improve, but I have to start teaching, because there were some other guys when I was speaking English. They were like, "What language is this?" And they asked me to teach them. Then I started it from my house. I started like with 6 neighbors, and then we grew up all the way like to 800 students. It was not only me, but you know, I trained some other guys that they can teach the beginner, the intermediate, and then the advanced classes I was teaching. So we developed, and I made my own private English course.
Wow.
Then
As a teenager.
As a teenager, yeah, exactly. And then in it was, I think, by the end of 1999, that at that time the Taliban were also in power in Afghanistan, their first time. Every prayer times, there is a group of Taliban at the Vice and Virtue. They were coming by the businesses, the shops, and every area that the people were doing businesses, and they were pushing the people to go to the mosque by the prayer times. It was the afternoon prayer time that I was continuing with the class, the English class, because my student wanted me, and they're like, just push the curtain and keep the door closed, pretend that we are not here. But unfortunately, the Taliban guys, the Vice Virtue, they saw and they came, they hit me with the cable, and I was young and strong, and I was boxing. So it's the second floor. I punched this guy in the face, and his blood nose becomes bleeding, and I jumped from the second floor. And then the next morning, I had to run away to Pakistan, and then from Pakistan to Iran, from Iran through the Gulf waters to Oman. From Oman, I came to Dubai, and I worked as a houseboy for a Christian family, like for almost a year, until the United States military came physically. Got involved in Afghanistan. Then I had to tell my story to immigration, and then they made all my documents. And they were really interested to work for them, because they actually got a lot of information through me, that how I got to UAE from Afghanistan without a visa, without a passport, because I explained step by step. I give them all the information.
You're an immigration risk for sure.
They wanted to be an informant.
Right.
So, but then I noticed that then they were going to use me against the poor people, because all those people that they fled the country, they were doing the labor job outside, and they wanted me to point out those guys, and I didn't like the idea. I told them, okay, I will work for you guys, but please send me home first. Then I will come back with my passport and visa and everything. So they gave me this information. I came back to Afghanistan. When I came, I started it, my first job at Kabul Military Training Center with the U.S. Special Forces. They took the test. They gave me a test of speaking and written English, and which most of the terms were military terms. I was not familiar with those.
Right,
so, but luckily I passed. So I continued like 1 year over there. After 1 year, based on my talent and my loyalty, they introduced me to U.S. Embassy, the Regional Security Office, and then working on a special project, the anti-terrorism assistance, for 1 year. Then they introduced me to
anti-tourism.
yeah,
Terrorism.
yeah, anti-terrorism. Yeah, ETA.
Yeah.
Then after working over there 1 year, I was introduced to Chad's team. And
is your story similar for a lot of the other interpreters and folks who were involved with the military?
It's similar, but actually not all the interpreters, they do not receive the same treat and the same support and help, because working for the army, that was one challenge and risk, and then the evacuation, that's another challenge, and then coming to United States, this is totally another challenge and difficulties in the lives. It's not the way that people look at from the back, from the back of the scene. When they physically come to United States, now the interpreters, most of them like me, they cannot locate their advisors. When I couldn't do it in the past, like you have to have a letter from a 3-star general to recommend you for the SIV program. They are only paroled for 2 years, and they are only given like a very limited service for 3 months from the government, like welcome money and food stamp and stuff, and then after that they are by their own, which is really challenging and really difficult. And I hope that the people in the high rank of the government, they really take care of these problems. The Afghans who have came here, I see them that they are having difficulties finding jobs. They are having difficulties finding them shelters because they do not have the credit and they don't have the right documents yet. They are only issued like a humanitarian parole visa for 2 years. And then they are also introduced a caseworker. Most of the time, those caseworkers are not really answering the phone. They're not available to help them. So there is all kinds of challenges.
A lot of challenges.
Yes.
How many Afghan refugees are here in the United States after all this?
Over 100,000.
Over
100,000, yeah.
And so where are they living? Where are they staying right now?
Well, they came back. When they came back, they went to different bases around the country, and then those places were shut down, and they were given, like Aziz said, like a very minimal amount of money, like what $1,500 a person, and then 3 months of support, and then you got to think Aziz speaks good English. He has lots of friends and connections. If you go in another country, the only thing you own is a backpack that you evacuated with. You don't speak the language. You have no credit. You can't get, he would not be able to get a house or apartment without us being able to help him.
Yeah.
How do you get a apartment? It's hard enough to find housing here in the United States right now. There's a housing crisis, unless you want to live in a major city.
Yeah.
And so they're being forced.
Or Nebraska.
Yeah. So they're being forced to live in these cities, work, probably horrible jobs if they could find one, and it's just going to be a catastrophe. It's set up to be a catastrophe. There's no system or plan in place to help these 100,000 people that have been brought here. And again, we're thankful for the support Aziz is getting, but we know that's not the case
for most
people. And it's a tragedy. One, we shouldn't have the mentality like, well, hey, they're not in Kabul anymore, they're not in Afghanistan anymore, so they should be thankful.
Right.
That's not the right.
If you can't take care of your family or yourself, it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah, if you could do the right thing, do the right thing. We did the wrong thing by the way we left Afghanistan, but helping some people get out in the individual basis, that was the right thing. But don't stop 10% the way into it. Help these people get resettled and reacclimated. They're in a new country. Get them English training. Let's pay for their our government pays for a lot of silly things. And and spends
lot of money,
wastes billions and billions of dollars. Can we get them some English training? Can we get them some job training? What I have seen about Afghans, particularly like guys like Aziz, is entrepreneurial spirit and hard workers. I mean, you think about what Aziz just said. He was teaching as a teenager, self-taught to teach 800 people. Fled the country after his encounter with the Taliban. Comes back, goes work for the U.S. Special Forces, goes work for our U.S. State Department in anti-terrorism, and then after that comes over to work at the premier special operations unit in the world for 10 years. He's a motivated individual. He's always working to achieve a lot of my personalities, Aziz has, and I've seen that in so many Afghans. They're just entrepreneurial people, hardworking people. You see that from people from that part of the world quite often. And so I think they could be a contribution to America if we could help them.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a social dependency thing. They're not just looking for a handout and looking to live off welfare for the rest of life. What they're looking for is just to be empowered, to be taught, to be integrated. And that's I think we owe that.
This is happening around the world, though, right? I mean, not all of
it's not just
all
America.
the Afghan refugees have ended up in the United States. What are other countries doing to deal with this? I mean, I'm sure that the problem is the same.
I think every country is a little different. I don't know if you can speak to it. What I've seen, every country has handled it a little bit different. Albania, to me, Albania has been the kind of one of the best examples.
So what have they done that makes it a best example?
Well, the country itself has went to like places that have camps and retreat centers. They give a good transition home, so they're actually not being they have like a year to be able to stay in this transition home. And there at the transition home, there's education and training and reintegration training, like how to speak the language and how to be prepared for a job. And so they're not just when they come to America, for example, they land. They're put in a ghetto, the ghettos of our cities, literally the ghettos of our cities. Like when he landed in Houston, I told Will, my chief of staff, do not let them take him.
Yeah. Because
I didn't feel safe for him and his wife and kids to stay one night in the area of Houston that they're bringing them to. Intercept them and tell them we have him, we're hiring him, he's gonna work for us, and we did. But they're going in like places that I won't drive.
Yeah.
And,
right.
I mean, I was in Ukraine 2 weeks ago in Kiev where they're bombing people. I feel safer there than driving to parts of Houston where they were going to send him.
Sure.
And so this is where they're going. And then they don't speak the language. They have to fend for themselves for groceries. The caseworkers that's going to answer the phone every third or fourth day.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing in America. And they're going to get like 3 months of support, and then they're going to be on their own. But places like Albania, they're have a camp where they can be there for a year, and they're in that year they're going to be provided for and then trained of how to reintegrate. Reintegration is important if you were going to go to another country and not know anything or not know anyone.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. What's the on ramp?
Yeah. What's the on ramp?
It's integration, really. It's not.
Yeah. It's not reintegration. It's integration. Yeah.
It's getting connected.
Yeah.
It's interesting because in the United States we understand immigration, and we have a huge immigration, I'll say, problem. Mm-hmm. On our borders where we allow so many people to come into the country with very little vetting, but then support them on the other side of that.
We don't.
I mean, many of the ones who are coming across the border illegally, we do.
Right.
But not people who have given their lives to the United States government and to the cause of freedom and democracy.
Yeah.
If you could prescribe, maybe Aziz, if you could prescribe, this is what would be the ideal situation for these families right now, what would that be? What would you like to see done to help these families?
Well, actually, in addition to what Chad said, I would like to add something that all these Afghans, when they come here, they do not speak English, especially the people who were trained by the CIA to counter terrorism. They only speak Afghan languages. They're brought and left here and only help for a temporary time. I'm thinking if the government, come up with a plan, like at least for 1 or 2 years of help and support for these guys, especially for the integrating them with the communities, the culture, and then finding them the jobs and English learning courses and the Medicaid, of course, which is really expensive in the United States. So there is much more that the United States government can do for these people. Same like the United States citizens, they should have the rights the same rights as the United States citizens because they lost everything.
Right.
They lost their earnings, their parents, relatives, friends, everything. They're just by themselves. Most of them are doing these hourly working in restaurants, but still they get this attitudes and this bad behavior. Like it's like a cross culture in some part of the United States. Some people think that all Afghans are terrorists. So,
right.
I'm thinking that it will be really helpful that if they come up with like a longer program, help and support for these guys will be much.
In training and teaching.
Yes.
Yeah. So the defense of the government would be like, we put millions of dollars in this, right? So they have this thing called Welcome US. Welcome.us. You can look it up, and I was excited about it when it first came out because I think it was $67 million went into it, and then and it was gonna be all these grants and stuff, and then I seen the board of directors come out, which was the Clintons and the Obamas, and I was a little disheartened,
Sure.
maybe a lot.
Sure.
And
sure.
And so what's happened with this is all this money goes to these resettlement agencies, right?
Yeah.
And so all these resettlement agencies bid on government contracts, and they got access to this money to resettle people, and but it's a racket. I mean, they could go in and literally take all this money, and they only have to give a very small percentage to the Afghan family, whatever and that company could profit off the rest.
Yeah.
And so all these companies came in and are just making millions and millions of dollars.
The Clintons are involved in that.
Off it, yeah.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
That's an odd thought.
Kind of like a
They would
Haiti,
do that.
maybe a Haiti part,
Right.
2.0.
Sure.
But I mean, so it's a typical government. Somebody sliding something in a bill, creating a lot of money for a lot of people to make money.
Yeah.
A lot of people in Washington D.C. to make money. A lot of people who have friends in Washington D.C. to make money. But ultimately, what the bill was meant for, where the money's intended to go, never gets there.
Well, and I think that was the genesis. That kind of ideology is the genesis of the rescue effort, right? It was, well, the government is not going to handle this well.
Right.
So it needs to be private people, private citizens who do this. And that needs to be, I think ultimately that's probably what is going to be required to get, Afghan families.
It's what's happening
On
with
track,
him
right.
on an individual basis. I told him, I mean, he had a place to go. The government,
Right.
In defense of them, they had a system in place. He came here.
Yeah.
They set him up in a resettlement organization. They were going to pick him up at the airport. They were going to put him in a hotel, and he would have got $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
And some food stamps, and me as an individual said, no.
Yeah.
That's
right.
not suffice.
Sure.
I'm not going to let you go stay in the ghetto where your wife and children are probably going to be shot because they can't communicate
Right.
with some gangsters in this area, and or know how to go get groceries or not be able to get a hold of a caseworker. That's not okay. And so we stepped in as individuals, just like we had to in the evacuations. We brought them. We got them a nice Airbnb.
Yeah.
We rented a van to be able to take them around, and we brought them in front of several churches
Right.
to be able to tell their story. And those people from those churches and from those communities came behind them and supporting this family. And there's a lot of, I've had a lot of people reach out to me going through that same process, a lot of Afghan, and I'm like able to line up a job for them, but they're like, well, the government says I have to go to Las Vegas because they have that many slots in Las Vegas. And so they can stick them in a hotel in Las Vegas, give them government benefits, but there's no job there for them.
Right.
And so, I'm encouraging some of the Afghans, like, hey, those benefits may seem like a lot,
Go out and do
but
your
they're
own
not.
thing.
They're not. Go do your own thing. Get with a community, and communities could help a lot more.
Yep.
And it's just a shame. It's just waste of taxpayer funds
Right.
to go into this system that's not helpful at all.
Yeah.
It was set up to do the right thing, but people always, like in our government, take advantage of it and making money off of it, making money off of these people instead of helping.
Well, and it's the community. So, you know this, but I pastored a church in the city of Fremont, California. So it's southeast of San Francisco. Fremont, California, a lot of people don't know this, largest Afghan population in the United States, largest Afghan population in the world outside of Afghanistan is in Fremont, California.
Yes.
I don't know if you knew that or not. So huge Afghan population because in the 80s when Russia went into Afghanistan, a lot of refugees, they were settled in Fremont, California. And so one of the strongest segments of that city, and again, I pastored there, I lived there, one of the strongest parts of that city is the Afghan community that's there. And, asking a lot of questions about how that happened and why it happened. It was the city of Fremont back in the mid-'80s that said these refugees are here, and we as a city, we as a community need to take the responsibility to bring them into our community and set them up to give them what they need. And it's restaurants, it's stores, it's been 30 years, so it's everything. Why aren't more communities doing that? Why aren't cities like Houston going, this is our responsibility now? Or smaller communities saying, this is our responsibility now? Why is that not happening?
Exactly.
Well, one, I think it has been done. It has been done in some places, so I don't want to discredit those who aren't doing it because it is being done. Some are doing it. I think, but in large, why it's not is because we have become, as a culture in America, this was in the 80s in Fremont, right?
Yeah.
A lot's changed in our country in the last 40 years to where we, as a culture, are starting to lean and depend more and more on our government, saying, well, the government has this.
Right.
And in the 80s, we didn't believe the government would have it, and the government didn't have it.
I know pastors in Fremont who said, well, these refugees showed up, and as churches we got together and said, we need to do something to take care of them. But that's what's changed, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think culture in America changed, the government dependence has changed, and there's this push, obviously, we see this push towards socialism in America, which is terribly dangerous, and this is an example of why it's dangerous, because now you can depend on the government to do something that the people in the communities should be doing, and ultimately government never does it well.
Yeah.
But yet, through our voting, we're voting to give them the power to do that, and now we're giving them our money through increased taxation to do that, and they can't do it well. Where if we were voting more conservatively, we could be keeping that money to ourselves and making better use of it instead of trusting our government with it.
Yeah.
Because it always ends up in somebody's pocket.
Yeah. So, and I think in all this,
I think somebody says taxation is theft. I've heard that before.
Taxation is theft. See the shirt.
I think Michael has that shirt on right now.
I might own that shirt. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that is, whether taxation is theft or not, and I think it probably is. It gets back to personal responsibility and community responsibility and communities caring for each other. Here's kind of my last question then. What happens to Afghan refugees if the government and cities just go, this isn't our responsibility? Are Afghan communities that are already here going to help them? We hear a lot about people talking about radicalization. Well, they'll become so frustrated that they'll connect to whatever local terrorist organizations. Is that what happens? Or I mean, what happens?
Do they become homeless?
Yeah, actually, everyone is overwhelmed with all the flow of the migrants from many different countries, and lately Afghanistan. If the government or the community stop help and support, I mean, they will be totally homeless. There will be no other secondary option for them. Because even the Afghans, I see some of the Afghans, they're not giving themselves this permission to help the new flow, the new flow of the migrants in the United States, because they think that they have this thinking that Afghans are problem makers. They might have connections with some bad guys, or then they will get in trouble with them. So there is always this chances of leaving them alone. They will be totally homeless, helpless, and engaged and confronted with lots of anxiety, frustration, nervousness in their lives.
Yeah. So we've got to do something. Communities need to do something.
Yeah.
People need to take responsibility for it. I think churches are a big part of that. And I know Woods Edge, your church, has done a lot to support
Grace Community Church,
and other churches that have taken on that responsibility.
Yeah.
And that just has to be the answer. And pushing back and saying, well, the government is not going to do this well.
They're not going
so
to.
We need to do it.
And we're talking about it right now, but no one's talking about it. And
right.
That's not by accident.
Right.
I mean, it's been pushed out of the news cycle intentionally. And but again, in our country, our new people, over 100,000 here. How are we as a nation welcoming them?
Yeah, not well.
Not well.
And I think for some people, they do come to that conclusion. Well, my tax dollars have been used however they've been used. And so I've given. I gave at the office, right? My money's been taken from me. This problem has been dealt with my money. I don't now have a responsibility. But very pragmatically, it's a human problem. So as humans, we should care about other people. As Christians, we should certainly care about other people. But very pragmatically, as people who live in communities and want to live in communities with good citizens, we should help other people learn, integrate, and get involved in what we're doing. And I think one of the interesting things to watch with the Afghan vets, I say the Afghan vets who are coming here right now, is they really want to integrate into our society.
They do, yeah.
This is not a desire to go and create, something over here. The ones that I've met, have been very interested in being involved in what we're doing. So let's help them get there.
Yeah, that's in Dearborn, Michigan, or where's Ilhan Omar, right?
Sure.
Trying to create mini Somalia. They want to integrate. They're not wanting to create their own community.
Yeah. Why would you want a mini Somalia? That's crazy.
Yeah, right. You left it, right? You left it for a reason.
I mean, the real one is bad enough. Why would you want it? Right. Yeah, very good. Well, Aziz, I really appreciate your time, man, and thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
You're welcome.
Looking forward to seeing what will happen. I love seeing that picture of your kids training. And I sat and looked at it for a little while and just thought, man,
they look like they belong there. Right?
They look like they belong there. First of all, that's Houston, so
they're hanging loose. They belong there.
But what a blessing, and it's going to be amazing to see what God will do in their lives in the coming days. And we just need to continue to pray for others who are struggling, trying to figure this out, and support and help where we can.
Yep.
So appreciate it. Thank you. It's fun to do this in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice change for us.
Yeah.
For those of you that are watching, thank you for watching. If you're listening and have not yet subscribed, the most important thing you can do right now is subscribe. You're listening somewhere. Wherever it is you're listening from, your favorite podcast platform, make sure you are subscribed. That lets you know when this and other content comes online, and I want to make sure that you have that. If you'd like to watch this content, our archive of episodes, you can find it on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search for The Situation Report. The Situation Report, you'll find it there. And you can like, subscribe, of course, comment, and push out these episodes. Episodes like this are interesting, I hope, but more than that, people need to hear this message, as Chad mentioned. People just aren't talking about this. And it's important that people are talking about it. I was at a conference this week where there were a lot of broadcasters, and we were talking about what we do, and a lot of people were asking, why do you guys do that type of show? You could have an entertaining show, you could do a lot of other things. Why that type of show? Because we're living in a cultural moment where people need to understand what's going on, and then more than that, know what to do about it. And I think that's what we like to talk about is entertainment's fun, but what do we do about it? And that's where we live right now. This type of content you can share out with people in your life that need to know what to do about it. And hopefully that will be a help to them. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you next time. Many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day. The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. We've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live. Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org.